Hi, everyone. It's Suzy from the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast. I wanted to share with you an episode from a show I personally love and think you will too, the Truant podcast, hosted by Samantha Cameron, who is my friend, my colleague, and fellow certified author accelerator book coach. I chose to share this episode, even though we recorded it for the Truant because I think it is so in line with what we talk about here on the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast that you need to hear it and be introduced to just how smart Sam Cam is and how similar her writing advice is to mine. So if you love this episode, go ahead and find her podcast and go and follow it too. This episode is a great deep dive into Show Don't Tell and really highlights what Sam Cam does best. If you'd like to hear more episodes like this, remember to subscribe to the Truant Writing Podcast wherever you're listening right now. Enjoy!
Welcome to Truant Pen, a podcast of actionable advice for stuck writers. I'm your host, Sam Cameron, and today I am joined by Suzy Vadori. Suzy is Calgary best-selling author of the Fountain series. This fantastical series has received 3 Aurora nominations for Best Young Adult Novel. She's represented by Naomi Davis of Bookends Literary Agency. Suzy is also the founder of the Inspired Writing Community, a resident writing coach for writers helping writers, a touring member of the Young Alberta Book Society, and a former program manager for When Words Collide, a festival for readers and writers. Suzy specializes in breaking down complex writing concepts for newer writers into manageable steps to get the book idea exploding in their minds onto the page in a way that will make readers take notice. Suzy, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sam. It's awesome to be here.
So Suzy is here today to talk about her favorite subject, which is show, don't tell, a piece of writing advice that I think every writer has heard at some point. And when Suzy pitched this idea, she said, unless you think it's too basic, except I don't talk about it in a basic way. So we're going to talk about show, don't tell in a non-basic way.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's so much more than just this tired old phrase. So before you tune out and skip to the next episode, I promise you're going to learn something regardless of your skill level.
Nice. So let's start by talking about what does this actually mean? Because I think a lot of people interpret this advice in different ways. So what does it mean to you?
Oh my gosh, how long do we have? I could talk about this all day long. All right, so show don't tell in its basic format, right? I said I wasn't going to talk basic, but we're going to start there. Is sort of how you immerse readers in your writing. So we want readers to not just listen to or watch from the sidelines. We want them to actually be in your characters' bodies, experiencing what's going on around them, because we know from lots of research, we know that that's what engages readers and that's what makes writing more interesting to people. And when I talk to you, I mean, I tour a lot to schools and other conferences and I ask people why they read, why they like to write. It's because they want that experience, right? They want to escape from their real life and walk a mile in other people's shoes. If you're reading historical fiction, it's so that you can learn about other people's, or something that's set in a different place on Earth. It's so that you can learn about other people's lives, right? Or from a point of view that isn't your own. So there's lots of things that we can do. I mean, this is like at its crux. That's what show don't tell means. And so what what it means for writing is that there are real and technical skills that you can learn to make this happen in your readers' minds. And there's a lot of them, so I'm not going to go into them just yet. We're going to get through it. But you're going to learn some things. Some of them you've probably heard of, and some of them I can almost guarantee, unless you've been following me for a long time, you haven't.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I didn't mention this in the intro, but Suzy actually has her own podcast, which is the Show Don't Tell podcast, and that's what she talks about over there. So what you were just describing, Suzy, about how this is the way that you immerse your reader in the experience of the character. I think that's a really important point because that is a large part of what separates written fiction or even non-narrative nonfiction or memoir from other mediums of or media of storytelling. So I don't know if you've experienced this with any of the writers you've worked with, but I very commonly will see the issue where I'm reading a scene and it is like the author the narrator is like a camera describing what is visible. And the author is doing that because they've been told show, don't tell. And they interpret that to mean they should only show what is externally visible. But that loses out on what a novel can do that a television show, for example, can't do.
Absolutely. So I love that you use the example of a camera because I use that a lot when I talk about showing and telling. And by the way, telling is allowed. So for those before you put hateful comments saying telling is sometimes required, absolutely. But I can tell you that most writers that I work with initially don't show enough. So that's why we focus on that. There comes a point, like if I've been working with a writer for 6 months or something, when I'm like, okay, now you're over showing. But you're right, Sam. When we think we're doing it, what we do oftentimes is we have a character walk into a room and stop and look around and observe everything. We don't, that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about show don't tell in the way that is effective. We want to have your character interacting with the setting and actually experiencing that, and we want your readers to feel like they're actually in your character's body. And so the thing that you're talking about that we can do as writers, which is why I think that reading and writing is never going away, by the way, that we can't do in film and movies, is we have that interiority, right? So we've got two things at our disposal, or three really. We have inner thoughts, which is your character's thoughts, right? And typically in today's market, that we're talking either first person point of view or third person close, right? You may use omniscient as well. It's pretty rare these days unless you have a really good reason for using it within your book. It like somehow serves the story and there's no other way to tell it. Don't just pick them willy-nilly because in grade 12, or your high school English teacher, who may have been Sam Cam, I don't know. If your high school English teacher taught you all the different points of view and you just picked one, don't do that because in today's market, it's pretty rare to have omniscient, unless you must do it. It's actually the most difficult one. And for those of you who are new to writing or don't remember your English teacher's words, omniscient means that you can hear multiple characters' thoughts. It can be really hard to do well. But inner thoughts is something that we have. The other two things that we have in writing that we don't have anywhere else. I mean, you do have inner thoughts in movies before you put in the comments, oh, what about voiceovers? Yeah, but you can do them. They're distracting, they're difficult, and you can't do them to the extent that you can. We still feel like somebody's narrating the story. We never feel like when we're watching the movie, we are the person, right? Even if you've got
Yeah.
that voiceover. And then you've got reactions or sort of visceral reactions that happen in their body. And then we also have reactions, which sometimes can be internal as well. So you're reacting to the world around you, you're reacting to the setting, you're reacting to what's happening, what other characters are doing to you, around you, near you.
Yeah. And actually, I was recorded an episode with Suzy on her podcast about writing for young adults. And one of the things we talked about was how interiority is really, really popular these days. And so if you are kind of looking at older models, you may not see it as much as if you're looking at newer models. So it's important to stay kind of up to date on what's trendy. And I think part of why high levels of interiority are so popular right now is exactly because it's what separates um, written written works from visual, and so it's
Yeah.
it's what we can't get from these other media, and so we want more of it in books.
Yeah. And I think, as I mean, we'll talk about other things in, other mediums, even including social media or things that you can consume on the internet, which are competing with reading. And that sort of ability to climb into somebody's shoes is something that people expect now. It's because
Yeah.
we've cracked it, right? Like there's a lot of research. I mean, think about social media. You are the product, by the way, on social media. They know exactly how to get your brain engaged. But we can learn from some of those things in writing as well. We can learn from all of the advances that have been made in understanding what holds attention. And we can do that by immersing your in the showing. I want to say one other thing, Sam, about that
Mhm.
camera metaphor, because I use that metaphor a lot when talking about when to show and when to tell. So if you would imagine for a moment that you are a movie director, when you're, okay, we're going to manifest this for everybody listening right now. When your book series becomes a movie or a Netflix, series or whatever it is that you're going to end up being, it's going to be on the screen. Let's just manifest that. We'll state it that way. When it happens, there will be choices to make, and that is your role as the writer. Okay, so there's your story and there's your plot, and you can write it straightforward. But you have choices to make along the way. You're the director. As the writer, you're the director. You hold the movie camera. Okay, and what that means is you get to choose when you show, which is like zooming in, right? And listening to all the things. We're going to hear the dialogue. We're going to feel the things. We're going to get the interiority. We're going to be in the moment. And when to tell, which is zooming out, and it might be a montage, right? So I'll give you an example for a moment. So let's say that in your story, two people walk across a bridge. Okay, that's what's in the outline. That's what's in the plot. It has to happen. They have to walk across the bridge. But you need to decide as the writer when to show and zoom in and hear what they say while they're crossing the bridge and all the details that happen and slow it down, right? And be on that bridge with them and walk across the bridge. Is that conversation important? That is your decision. That is your job as the director of your book, right? You're the writer. That's your job. You have to decide. If it's not important and they just have to get to the other side, like the chicken crossing the road, right? If that's all you need to do, zoom out, play the music, not really in a book, but imagine that you're playing the music, you have them hold hands, skip across the bridge, and they're done, right? We don't hear what happens. We don't know, or you could summarize, they talked about the chicken crossing the road the whole time that they walked across the bridge. I mean, it's not a really good example, but I'm kind of, under the gun here to get an example. But yeah, you can tell that as well. And so think, yeah, that movie camera or that camera lens is a really important one. And just know that you have choices. And when you are showing something, we don't want to hear everything all the time and start every single day of your character's life with them waking up and yawning and reaching for their glasses and then putting their feet down on the floor. And then, I mean, it can be really, really boring, right? So use it sparingly and make your choices. But where are the places that we need it? And by the way, waking up in a book, one of those things that's super cliche, it could earn you an instant rejection from an agent if you open your book that way. Um, Many other agents will accept it, but look for why it's different or how it's different. But yeah, I mean, we assume that people in the world wake up every single day and probably eat and probably use the bathroom, right? Unless there's
Yeah.
something interesting about it or it has to do with the story, you don't need to tell us.
Yeah. So that actually, that last bit sort of answers one of the questions I was going to ask you, which was, so to recap, a shown scene is one where you zoom in and the audience hears the dialogue word for word. We get the internal processing, we get the internal reactions, we get the physical reactions, and we get all up close and personal with that business. And then something that is told is like you are summarizing, right? You're not in the weeds with the character, right? As they're experiencing it, it's sort of like, you're telling your spouse what happened, at work, and you're just like, oh, there was a traffic jam on the way to work, or I crossed a bridge. And so you're summarizing it. You're not using all of those tools.
Exactly. And I'm going to talk in a minute about how to sort of technically do this in your writing, but I'll share an example because what you said is absolutely true. Um, it's a lot more interesting. Okay, I could tell you this story about this guy that I actually saw outside my house today. And he was walking along, stopped at my little free library, and then he walked along some more. And then there was a banana peel on the ground, and he went up into the air, and his arms were flailing and everything. By now, I'm laughing. By the way, I lie for a living, so this didn't actually happen. I am a fiction writer. And so by this time, I'm laughing hysterically. I'm telling this story, and you're looking at me going, like, Susie, what are you talking about? And I say, oh, you had to be there, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things that we want to do is let your reader be there because we don't want them to hear the story secondhand. It's boring. Nobody wants to hear about that. But it might actually be have been hysterical to watch. I hope. By the way, the man didn't get hurt. That's why it's funny. But um, just so you don't think I'm a horrible person laughing at somebody falling outside my house. But yeah, so there's a lot of different things that we can do. But let's talk for a minute, Sam, if I can, about how
Mhm.
this actually happens and why this is really important to your
Yeah,
reader. Because there's
please do.
something just on this sort of movie metaphor. There's many writers and readers will say that when they read a book, it actually creates images or it kind of plays in their mind like a movie. That's very common. By the way, if you can't do that, that's okay. There's about 2% of the population who doesn't actually generate this experience, which is called fantasia, not to be confused with Mickey Mouse and the warlocks. But fantasia with a PH is the ability to voluntarily create images in your mind. And 98% of the population can do this. If you are part of the 2% who sees just blank, if I said, if I asked you, and just to test this really fast, if I asked you, picture an apple in your mind, and you might think I mean metaphorically, and then I asked you the color. Somebody with aphantasia, which is the opposite, right? That 2% cannot tell you the color because they didn't actually generate an image. So for those writers, you need to learn, you need to actually pay special attention to this because you don't want to write for 2% of the population. Um, what's funny is I've actually worked with a number of aphantasic writers, and a number of my colleagues are also aphantasic book coaches because they've had to learn how to construct this for other people and how to make this fantasia happen. I happen to be on the other, it's a continuum. I happen to be on the other end of the extreme where I can hear and smell and taste and all the things. And I'm trying to learn more about that because I'm fascinated by brain science and how show don't tell in your writing and how the techniques actually can make this thing happen in people's minds. It's pretty cool. But yeah, that's why you want to be giving readers details. Now they're going to fill some of it in. If you're aphantasic, you actually need the details as well because you will still experience it. Aphantasic people have extremely like well-developed imaginations, and they tend to be really good in scientific fields. But they need all the information because they're not going to fill it in, right? So you still need to write for them and give them enough details that they can construct something, right? Construct
Right.
something, whether it's the imagery of Fantasia or not. So
Yeah, and just to add, having aphantasia does not at all make it that so you can't be a writer. So if you just realize that
absolutely.
you have aphantasia from that little experiment, John Green has aphantasia. He's an incredibly successful
Yes.
author. So there's no reason that you can't learn to do this. Um, and there's probably things that you've found meaningful about reading as an experience, even if you have aphantasia. I actually have a critique partner who I don't know if she's all the way at the aphantasia end of the spectrum, but she's in that side.
Yeah, it's a
And it's actually really
continuum, right?
helpful for like me because I'm somewhere in the middle, I think.
Hmm.
Like I don't have the hyperphantasia, but I'm not at aphantasia. And it's actually kind of helpful for me to be writing for someone who's more towards that aphantasia side of the spectrum because she will make it very obvious to me if I haven't described enough.
Hmm.
Because she's like, I can't visualize this at all, right? Because she's not going to fill in the blanks the way that I fill in the blanks. But at the same time, I can kind of do the same thing for her because when she's writing, there's a lot of stuff that she's not visualizing. And so she kind of relies on me to say, like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's about how like there is a continuum of brains out there, and it's great to be aware of where you are on that spectrum so that you can be really aware and see it in your own writing and be able to compensate whether you're on one end or the other, right? Like again, they're all ranges of normal. It's not a disability if you
Mm-hmm.
can or can't do it. So it's just good to know. And so one of the things that happens in show, so one of the things that makes show don't tell the one of the most difficult techniques to learn is that this ability to fill it in, or however your brain constructs things, whether it's with images or whether it's not, whether it's with details and facts, um, you are doing that as you're writing. And so when you write, you are imagining this whole scenario, and then whatever gets on the page gets on the page. It's not going to be everything. We're going to talk about that in a minute because we don't want, you know, 8 pages of purple prose describing everything. That's not what show don't tell means. Again, you need to be judicious. You need to know how much. I'm going to share some of that. But what happens is as you write, you've got this beautiful world in your mind, whether that's visual or not, and then you write it down. What you want, your writing is almost like a game of telephone. So I'm sure you've all played the game of telephone. Sam, did you play the game of telephone as a kid? And
Yeah,
basically, what
yeah,
it is, if you have never played it, you sit in a circle or a line. And you think of a phrase or a word, it's usually a phrase or a sentence, and one of the kids whispers it to the next kid and whispers it to the next kid and whispers it to the next kid. And the goal theoretically of the game is to get it to the end of the line with it being intact. And but what usually happens, especially if you're a writer and you lie for a living, like we, like fiction writers do, you were probably that kid that if it got to the end of the line, it made too much sense. You said something else. That was me. I don't know if it was you. It
yeah.
was
No,
me.
there was always some kid who would make up something wildly different just to like throw off the whole game.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's part of the fun is that it doesn't actually translate. And so, but your goal as a writer is to get your writing to the end of the line so that they read it and they actually get what you were trying to say. That's where showing comes in and being very, very clear. Because here's the problem. When you read your own work back to yourself, your brain is really, really smart and it fills in the gaps. And so, whether or not you got it on the page, you will have no idea because you still see your beautiful picture and, your beautiful world, or you still count all your beautiful facts that you've put down on the page and it looks like it's complete and your brain is filling the rest in. But really, it's possible if you don't practice this that what you've actually written gets to the end of the line and the reader goes like, pardon me, like what is happening here? And then you end up with a 1 or 2 star review or somebody who doesn't finish your book and you're mad because you think that they don't like your idea, but they never even saw it. Right? They
Yeah,
only saw like this like I use the imagery of, if I was learning to draw, I mean, I'm a terrible drawer, by the way, and please don't offer to give me art lessons because lots of people offer to give me art lessons. I'm like, one day in my life that will be a priority, but I have a lot on my plate right now. So I draw stick figures. But I know darned well that if I wanted to paint the Mona Lisa, I'd have to go out and take lessons. But somehow this thing that we do where we see what we want to see on our page, it's not obvious. Like if I write stick figures, I know that that's not the Mona Lisa. I can see it with my eyes. The problem is when you read your own writing back, even if you've written stick figures because you haven't learned how to do this properly, you might actually conjure the Mona Lisa and think that you've written it. And so you think that your writing is amazing, right? And this
right.
happens to us. And I'm sorry if you're realizing right now that your writing may not be amazing or why, but it's because of this problem. And so don't be discouraged if it gets to the end of the line and you get that, kind of lukewarm review. You probably haven't paid enough attention on how to actually construct that in your reader's mind. And
Yeah,
you have to practice that. It's not something that you can do. Just like I can't paint the Mona Lisa without taking art lessons. I assume that
yeah,
if I spent 10,000 hours, which is what it takes to master a skill, I'd be able to paint the Mona Lisa. I assume that's true.
probably. And I was thinking
Maybe
about as
not.
you were, I don't know. I was thinking as you were saying this that there's also an element of showing which is not visual. So like on the one hand, it is about creating an image in the mind of your reader so they can visualize it, but it's also about creating emotion in your reader. And I was reminded as you were talking about a scene that I wrote for one of my books where there's an argument between these two siblings. One of the siblings has ADHD, and she's had a moment where her ADHD has kind of derailed a thing she was supposed to do, and her brother swoops in to save her. And then she's really mad about it because of the way that he swooped in to save her was really patronizing. And when I gave this scene to readers, the readers who had ADHD understood this experience. And so they
Oh,
got the
interesting.
emotions of the character right away. But the readers who didn't have that context were like, I don't understand why she's mad. Her brother helped her. And so I needed to then do more in that scene to contextualize that experience for so that it was clear to more than
Yeah,
just the
because if
readers
you
who had the
don't
experience.
have, if you, yeah, and sometimes we can lean on shared experiences and we can kind of tell or like mention it quickly, but you're absolutely right. If your reader doesn't have that in their memory bank and can't call on it, then you're going to have to show it to them. Okay, so I love that you brought up emotions because I want to talk about how, okay, so I just told you that you're writing stick figures maybe and you don't know how. So how could you actually find, like, I'm not saying that you always have to go externally. Yes, getting a reader to help you or getting a coach to help you, absolutely. That's the Cadillac version. I can show you exactly where you're telling and not showing. It's something I do every single day of my life with writers. But how can you find it yourself when you have this problem that you think that, your writing is amazing and you can construct this thing? And the first place that people usually talk about show no tell, and sometimes this is where it ends, this conversation is about emotion. And and we talk about don't name emotions. So that's like a sort of rule that's thrown out there. And like I said, you're going to hear some that are tired or typical, and you're going to hear some other ones that are new, and kind of my own thing. But not naming emotions is something that you've probably been instructed to do before. And what I mean is say, not that she's happy, but that she had a wide grin on her face, right? Which implies that she's happy. And so I want to show you why. Because people say, oh, yeah, yeah, that I can do that. But they think that it's like this snobby literary rule that makes quote unquote, you can't see me doing air quotes, but I'm doing air quotes, that makes good writing. And yeah, so using the brain again and how it actually affects your reader, I want to show you why that's a problem. Because if you tell me that she's happy, it's like I'm giving you a fact, right? And if you hold out your arms right now, Sam, I'm going to do this virtually. You hold out your arms, and I'm going to give you a fact, and I'm going to give you another fact. They're getting heavy, by the way. I'm going to give you another fact, going to give you another fact, and then you get tired of the facts and you drop them, right? That's what it feels like to read a textbook, right? That's the opposite of what we were trying to create. I'm giving you facts, and lots of, whenever I present this in a crowd, I do keynote speaking for schools and things like that. There's always somebody in the room that says, "I love textbooks," and that's great, right? Maybe your brain can hold a lot of facts. At once. But when we read, we need more than that. And so our brains actually go to sleep when you give us too many facts because it's already interpreted for us. She's happy, right? If you tell me that she had a wide grin on her face, I have to do something with that as the reader. And in fact, my brain has to wake up a little bit and say, she had a wide grin on her face. And then my neural pathways have to associate that with being happy. Oh, she's happy, right? You can see, my brain woke up and didn't hold that fact, she's happy. Thanks for interpreting it for me, Suzy, right? And told me something that I had to do myself. And I got the reader involved. And because of that, it's more interesting to them. It keeps them awake. Okay. So that's a very simple example.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
And I can see how that actually like imitates that. I can see how that imitates for our brains the experience of living in the real world, because in the real
Yes.
world, we encounter stimuli all the time. And so if instead of someone narrating to us their experience of whatever happened, right? Or just saying like, oh, she's happy. Um, if that person is instead narrating what our brain would be taking in visually
Yeah.
or auditorially or olfactory or whatever senses you want to use, if
Yes.
we're being given that information, then it's more similar to like walking around in the world and like you're interacting with a person and subconsciously or possibly consciously for some people, you're looking at people's faces and interpreting their body language and their tone of voice. You
Yes,
are
exactly,
bringing
Sam.
in that
You nailed it.
information. And so if
Yeah.
you're using those kinds of imitating that experience for the reader, it gives you your brain a closer experience to like living life.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, we don't walk around saying, I think I'm happy, right? We just walk around with that feeling. And so we want people to feel the feeling. And brains are cool, back to brain science. There's also research out there that shows that when we read something that does this well, the actual, brain waves and activity that happens are as if we're really there. So if we're in a scary situation, our heart might actually pound as we're reading, right? Like these things are actually happening within our body. So we want to engage the reader. This is like how we get you involved, right? We
Yeah,
don't want
I
to give
drank
you all the
so much
facts.
water when I was reading The Hunger Games for the first time because she's so thirsty for so much of the book.
Oh my gosh, right? Yeah, and
Yeah,
so that's what we want. And that's because it's done well in that book, right?
yeah.
And it's not just like, "Oh, I'm thirsty again." It's like, "Oh, my throat is so dry. I can't get the words out." Like you're actually describing it. I don't know how it's actually
I don't
described in
remember
that.
what
I can
words she
remember,
used,
but
but I remember being so thirsty and like it was such a tension for myself because I did not want to put that book down, but I had to keep leaving my room to go refill my water cup because I was drinking so much water.
oh my gosh, Sam, why did you not just have a cup? Oh, you had to leave it. I'm like, I thought you meant to
Yeah, I
get
kept
the water. Okay,
yeah,
to
no, no, I
refill
kept
it.
I
My
have this
brain caught
very
up
vivid
there.
memory of like being in my childhood bedroom and walking to the bathroom that I shared with my brothers to like refill my cup in the sink very frequently while I was reading that book.
I love that. And I mean, I'll date myself here, but I was not still in my parents' home when the Hunger Games came out. So, okay, but that's good. So that's emotions, but it's also leading into something else, this whole concept. And the more I study show don't tell, the more it kind of bleeds into every other thing in writing, right? Like I feel like it's the umbrella that ties things together, like agency and tension and like all the other
Ooh.
topics. But I'm gonna stick on I'm gonna stick on show don't tell. That's why I could talk about it all day. It's
Yeah.
like all of it is kind of related. So I'm going to talk about another one that you may have heard because it's very typical. And these are the two, like, there's actually three that are like super typical. The next one is don't use ly adverbs, right? And I'll
Oh,
explain that
adverbs.
for a second, right? Adverbs, because that's what people think show don't tell is. Don't name emotions and don't use ly adverbs. But again, I'm going to explain why, and then I'm going to extrapolate how that works in all of your writing and not just these two simple rules. Um, but an ly adverb is an ad like something that describes a verb that adds to a verb that ends in ly, like slowly, quickly, these things. And again, the reason why it's not just because we're being snobby or because we're saying that it's bad. It's not always bad, by the way. If you're writing for middle grade or a lower reading level, use them because your readers need them. Those facts to interpret, they need those extra cues, but adults don't. And in fact, there's always a more like if you're using, she walked quickly, it's just boring. Again, you're interpreting it for us. It's the exact same thing as the emotion. You're giving us the fact, and we're getting like overload in our brains, and we're not interpreting anything. She strode to the corner, her heels clicking, right? She's walking quickly. Way more interesting. That one happens to be longer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be longer, right? So just take that
Hmm.
extra beat. It's one thing that you can look for in your own writing where you're always telling. Now, does that mean that you have to get rid of 100%? 100% you don't. But try and get rid of a lot. Like if you've got that littered all over your opening pages, an agent or a reader is going to pass. They may not know why, right? And this is the other thing is when I teach techniques, I like to tell writers, people are going to like your writing more. They may have no idea why. Even an agent or an editor may not know why when you do these things they like your writing more. In fact, a lot of my clients come back and say to me, the agent's like, this just jumped off the slush pile or whatever, right? Like that kind of language because we're working on things, we're engaging them, we're using techniques that they may not notice, and we don't want them to notice what we're doing,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not the point. The point is to engage the reader. Okay.
Yeah.
Then
I
the
like that
third,
you're
yeah, go ahead.
explaining why to do these things because I think a lot of writers have heard, oh, don't name emotions, don't use
Yeah.
ly adverbs. And so what they do is they take those things out of their work, but they don't realize that they need to replace them with something else
Yeah,
to get
exactly.
across the meaning that those words were trying to do.
Exactly. And to light up the reader's brains in the process. So there
Yeah.
are technical ways that you can do that. And then the third really typical one, which I won't spend a lot of time on, is info dumps. If we're info dumping, like if you're giving me 3 pages of description of your world building before you get to the story, it's too much. Take it out. I like to say, give us a detail or two, right? And sprinkle them throughout. So you may need that information if you're writing fantasy in particular, where the world is not on Earth and it's something completely new. You need that information, so go ahead, write it, but know that
Hmm.
don't count it to your word count, right? And then sprinkle in a few things. It's often enough to give us a few really specific things. That's one that I would say. If you are being vague, I can't picture anything. I can't remember anything, right? There's nothing to remember because you haven't given me anything, right? So if you're using words like objects or something or someone, be specific. Be as specific as you can. And that doesn't, again, I don't need a paragraph. Use a word from your world. She picked up something. Give me something that she picked up that means something in your world, right? Um, because and this is the one, the vague versus specific rule. This is the one where I can tell you if I read your manuscript and I'm seeing a lot of vagary, I know that you haven't made a decision. Somewhere along the line, you haven't decided yet. And there's a lot of advice out there that will say, push through, don't stop. And that might be true, except in this case. If you haven't decided something, decide. If you haven't decided how your magic works, if you haven't decided who the killer is, if you haven't decided something in your book, you are going to have passages that are so vague because you don't know the answer that you can it's really hard to go back and fix them later because there's nothing to fix. There's no grammatical issue,
Hmm.
right? But search on these words because you're going to have to rewrite that whole section to layer in something else when you make
Yeah.
that decision. So I like to get writers to stop and make a decision. And writers are often say, "How do you do that? How do you know that I haven't decided, who she marries yet or who she chooses in the love triangle?" I'm like, "Oh, I can tell." It doesn't mean give it away. It just means that you use some really vague language as like something that you do as a protection to
Yeah.
to leave all your options open. If you know the answer, you can still obscure it if it's not time to make the big reveal yet.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's Lisa Cron who talks about, and I forget which one of her books she says this in. She says decisions beget decisions,
mhm.
which is, or like specifics beget specifics might be what she said.
Yes. Get
Which is the
specific,
idea
please.
that like once you make the decision, I say this as someone who loves using placeholders when I'm drafting, for things I don't know, but I also know very clearly when I'm writing something. So I was drafting something the other day. I knew that these characters were going back to their hometown. I had not decided where their hometown was or anything to do with their hometown. And so I was like, well, we got to decide something. So I decided they came from a place that had a lot of dairy farms. And that one detail, like,
Yeah.
exploded the whole rest
It
of everything. Like, I,
it
I
gave
had
you a
so much more I
lot.
could write about.
Yeah, and you're not sort of just marking the scene and getting through it. You can be specific. Yeah, you don't have to decide everything, but sometimes you're going to come to these decisions and you have to. And as a coach, and I'm sure you do this with your writers as well, Sam, but as a coach, I like to warn writers up front. I am going to force you to make decisions. Now, I will not hold your feet to the fire. You can change your mind. Now, if we're changing your mind every single week, we're going to have a very different conversation, and we're going to figure out why we're doing that because we're never going to make any progress. But here's the thing, because again, back to brains. If you've ever experienced overwhelm or what you would describe as overwhelm, you probably have at some point in your life. But overwhelm is a real phenomenon that happens to your brain where your brain actually shuts off, right? And the reason that it happens is because it's like if you were coming up to a fork in a road and you could go left or right and you don't make a decision and so you stand at that fork in the road, that's what your brain does. You haven't given me information, so I can't do anything. Right. And so people don't often recognize overwhelm. They think that it's because they have, too much going on. And it is. But if they just made, if they would just make those decisions and they could start to move forward. And so what I do with writers is we say, well, we came to a fork in the road, pick left or right. If we go down the left fork in the road and the trees are all dead and, like it's spooky and scary and you want to turn back, turn back. But you know what? We can do that pretty quickly. We can start writing, like you said, if you'd picked, it was an area with dairy farms and then it got distracting or didn't fit, you could always go back to that scene and say, okay, it's not dairy farms. Actually, um, it would be more helpful if they were fields of soy or cornfields
Right.
because I want the spooky element of being children of the corn or something. then you would be able to go back very quickly and fix that. And so then we would go down the other fork in the road. But it's actually faster in the long run and gets you further and gets you more information than if you just stood there. Because,
Yeah.
for people that I speak to that write a book for a decade or several decades, because you're out there, I'm sure you're listening to this podcast, some of you, or if you've, been writing and putting in these sort of vagary scenes that you're maybe never going to be able to fix because you don't know that they're there. Um, but your reader's gonna be like, what is this? I have nothing's happening in my brain here because you're giving me nothing to work with. Yeah, so you're always further ahead if you make those decisions than if you
Yeah.
just stand at the fork in the road.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers are scared of, they want to make sure they're making the right decision or the quote unquote right decision or writing their book the quote unquote right way. And I like to say that the right way to do it is the way that results in a done book. And
Yeah,
and like Suzy
exactly.
said, you can change your mind about anything,
Sure you
right,
can.
at any point, so it's just important to make a decision so that you can have the specifics to come up with more specifics, and make your way to the end. Um, and then if you realize that that one decision didn't work, you can undo it and make a
Yeah.
different decision.
Exactly. And our mentor, Jenny Nash, actually of Author Accelerator, I don't know if you read this one, Sam, kind of blindsiding you here, but she sent out a newsletter in January that I haven't had a chance to talk to her about yet. But I'm excited about it and I keep quoting it. So maybe one of those is going to cross her mind. And Jenny, if you're listening to this, I want to talk about it. Okay. So she put into ChatGPT because we're trying to find, ethical and interesting uses of AI in the writing world, which isn't to write your book, by the way, because it'll be full of that vagary. That's how I
Yes,
know that something is AI written, actually. It's because it
you
can't
say,
generate anything new. It
yeah,
just kind of it's the common, it looks for the common denominator in successful writing and then like makes an average of everything, right? So it's never specific. But anyways, that's totally not what I was going to talk about. So in Jenny's newsletter, she actually shared that she asked her chat what how many decisions does a writer make while writing a fiction novel? And it came back with somewhere between 250,000 to 1 million. And she said it kind of blew my mind, but then I thought about it. And I mean, we're talking about bigger decisions, but decisions on everything. And this is where I want to lead into one of the next things that you can look for in your own writing, where you are absolutely telling us, okay? And that this one's one that people miss. And it is when you are reporting about something, and I talked about this already a little bit, but I'm going to bring it into your scenes, reporting something off screen, right? So
yeah,
when you make a decision, okay, you look at your outline. Hopefully you outline. I love to outline. If you don't outline, that's okay. When you come up with an idea for a scene or something has to happen, a plot point has to happen, you know that they need to cross the bridge, right? We can start that scene so many different ways and we can do different things with it. And this is even true if you're writing memoir or something that's true. We can compile, if you did something every day, but you want to bring it into a moment and show us one day, you could bring a whole bunch of days together and show us one day, right? Even if it didn't all happen on that one day, that's allowed. But here's the thing: you have to make a decision about how to start that scene. And writers often go with the first thing that comes to their mind, and they don't realize that they are the director and that they can choose. They just sort of write it and don't think about it. But you could start that scene 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later. You could bring somebody else in the scene. You could make the bridge look different. You could make the river look different. You could make it a different time of year. You could do lots of different things that would make the scene more interesting. One of the choices that you can also make is how do we find out that piece of information? And one of the choices where you are always telling as if you're telling us about something after the fact, right? So it shows up in different ways in manuscripts. Sometimes it's just you're too lazy to write the fight scene, and so you tell us about it later, and you don't realize that you're doing it. Sorry for calling you lazy, but like you something in you resists, or you didn't know enough about it, or you think it's scary, and so you don't do it. It's always better to bring us into the moment. Um,
yeah,
in that case, it might be somebody comes home bedraggled. You skip ahead to the soldier coming home from the fight scene, and then he tells his spouse about the fight scene, and that's how we hear about it. It's like my story with the banana peel that I talked about
yeah,
earlier, right? You had to be there. Bring us there and do the work, right? Don't be stingy with the reader because you don't feel like writing a fight scene. Do the work, immerse us. So watch for scenes like that where a character is telling another character about something that happened that we aren't present for. And if it happened in the past, drop us into a flashback, right?
Hmm.
Let us be there. Because if we're not there, we care about it a lot less and we're going to retain it a lot less. We're not as interested in it. This
Yeah.
also shows up in manuscripts. If you have, I call them recap scenes. So a lot of times, a few times, you know, publishers will contact or tell their writer, go work with Suzy, your manuscript's too long. Let's find places like to cut your manuscript. Because this happens in publishing, right? They might have a cap in terms of word count. And if a manuscript's too long, and the writer tells me, I don't want to cut anything, I'm not willing to cut any of my scenes. And I go, well, let's just look, right? Because I promise you, I can find places where you can cut your word count without changing anything that happens. I promise it's true. And so, one of the biggest places that I can find a lot of word count in many, many books, especially like epic sized books, like long science fiction or historical fiction, is when we're recapping scenes. So, it looks kind of like this: you did the work, you took us to the battle, and you brought us to the moment where the soldier's best friend dies in his arms, and we're just gutted. You did a great job, by the way, writer. Good job. You did a great job of the scene. And then the next scene, the soldier is walking to the house of his best friend's widow, and he tells him all of that again. And we watch the widow and we go through her reaction again. Here's the problem. I
Right.
just went through as a reader. Okay, you did a good job. You showed me. I was gutted. I maybe put the book down for a beat and went and, got a glass of water or something a little stronger to get through that. And the issue is I'm not going to do that arc again, and I already saw it. So don't lose sight of your reader. Everything that you write needs to be focused on your reader. Does the reader have the information already? This is also true for info dumps. Does
Hmm.
your reader need the information? Does your reader have the information? And writers will say to me, but the widow needs to know. Okay, cool. So that's where you slip into telling. You know, Soldier Bob showed up at Widow Martha's door and they cried together as he relayed the battle scene. We already
Right.
know. We don't need
Right.
that,
Like you
right?
can think about, to go back to the movie analogy that you brought up at the beginning, right? You said that showing is when we're like zoomed in on the scene and
Yeah.
we're like having it in real time, and telling is when there's a montage. So in that,
Yeah.
like if that was a movie, you would like have the death scene with the dramatic music and everything, and then the director would probably have like a silent shot of the soldier
Of the
knocking on the
widow
widow's
sobbing.
door
Yeah,
and the widow
exactly.
sobbing without us actually hearing any of the words, right? And that's
Sweet.
essentially accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah. Because we can't go, yeah, but think about your reader. You don't want them to have to go through that emotional arc again.
Right.
And also, it's boring because we already know what happens. So we're just
It
going to
loses
skim.
its punch.
Now, if you must repeat a scene, if you must bring something up again, because I can hear it already, but Susie, I have to. You can, but just remember when you do that, keep it as short as possible and also give us something new. So this actually comes
Mm.
up a lot of times when we're writing book two. And writers contact me, book one, I actually went through this recently. One of my writers, she wrote a book and it became a USA Today bestseller, and she's writing book two, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm just rewriting book one. And then I have to blow it up because the problem is, and people think it's going to be easier because they already created the characters in the world, but the problem is you've already created the characters in the world, so what the heck do you talk about, and how do you, how much do you need to recap, and how much can you kind of move on? And I like to say, keep it fresh and give the reader new information. So the way that this shows up is, sure, you might have to recap what happened at the battle in book one because we need the information or the book doesn't make any sense. But maybe the character's 10 years older and has a different perspective on it. And instead of, being gutted by it, he sees it in a different lens, right? Give us new
Hmm.
information.
Yeah.
Or he found out later, that the battle should have never happened because the captain was corrupt and they weren't supposed to be there. Like give us something. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's give us something different.
Yeah, I'm thinking about as you were saying that, like dual POV romances, where one of the challenges for that writing in that genre is you kind of need to have both characters hit certain emotional beats. But like for example, you don't want to write a whole scene, like let's say it's the first sex scene. You don't want to write the whole sex scene from character A's point of view and then rehash the entire same scene from character B's
Yes.
point of view. Like that would be really boring. You want to pass the baton. So that might be like the sex scene is from character A's point of view up until a point, and then it switches to character B, or character A gets all of the sex scene and character B picks up with the next morning. Like those are the things that you don't want to rehash the same scene, even if you have multiple POV characters.
Well, yes, and I will say that many writers will come back and say, "But I saw that in a book." And if you actually study what they did, there may be some overlap, but they're bringing something new, right? Or something that we
Mm-hmm.
missed, right? So if there's an overlap, you don't want to rehash the whole scene, certainly not the same way. But if there's overlap and you're showing an event again, because you start it, maybe they have completely different interpretations of what happened,
Yes. Yeah.
right? But use it sparingly because it's boring. Okay. So I don't know how many more we can go through. Like I said, I can talk about this
I
topic
mean,
all day.
I could talk about it all day too. So where have we been so far? I usually like to try to recap what we've talked about. So we've
Good
talked
luck.
about there's a place for both showing and telling, and that you as the writer have to decide based on the needs of your book and the needs of your reader which things to show, which things to tell. You have various tools at your disposal like interiority or internal thoughts. Um, we have things like body language, physical reactions. Those are all tools that we have. We've talked about we don't name emotions. You don't use ly adverbs because you're going to replace those things
Yeah.
with,
With
you
more
know,
active things that tickle our
more
brains.
active, yeah, more active
Hmm.
things that tickle our brains. We talked about being specific, which kind of relates back to the not using the adverbs and not use naming the emotions. There's an example I like to use when I'm teaching where I took this scene and I took out all of the interiority, and then I show three versions of the scene. The first one is there's just exterior, no interior. The second version is telling. I just state the character's emotions. And then the third
Hmm.
version is what the author actually wrote. And what I inevitably find is that when we get to what the writer actually wrote, which is a really good example of showing, the emotions are much more specific because the author gets very specific into the behaviors of the narrator, into the
Yeah.
behaviors of the person they're talking about. And so there's actually more nuanced emotion than when those emotions are just named. Um,
Well, that's actually absolutely true. And one of the things, if you haven't gotten Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi, sorry, Becca, Emotion Thesaurus and its sequels, it's an amazing resource. And what it is basically a thesaurus. So if I want to say happy, it's like 10 pages of how to describe happy. You're going to use it in your own way and extrapolate from that, but it's a really cool resource because what you just said, Sam, there are nuances. And so sometimes if I want to say angry and I'm not sure how to say it, then I go and look at that. Um, I go and look at the thesaurus and I read the 10 pages and I'm like, none of this is right. And I'm like, oh, I was being really lazy. I was being lazy saying angry, but what I actually meant was overwhelmed, or what I actually meant was scared, or what I actually meant was something else. And that's the other thing is we can be really flippant when we try to categorize it and name it. It's like we're not getting into that nuance because there's more than just happy, sad, and angry in the world.
right.
There are all these other like really subtle things that you can describe, and it becomes really crystal clear. And I like to say this when I'm editing or providing suggestions when I'm working with a writer. I'm like, hey, I gotta be brave as an editor and guess, and sometimes I'm gonna be wrong. But guess what? If you love what I made up, because I'll put suggestions in the margin, not in your text, but I'll be like, hey, maybe don't name this emotion, try this. And then I guess, and I'll give them a really original description usually. And sometimes if they want it, they can use it. I don't care. As an editor, that's
Hmm.
kind of the deal.
That's
But
what's kind
if
of, yeah.
I'm wrong, sometimes that's even more helpful. And you're like, oh my gosh, Susie, she wasn't angry. She was overwhelmed. Or that doesn't fit. And I'm like, okay, what does fit? Right. And that reaction. So I love using the thesaurus for that when I'm stuck, because sometimes it actually teaches me that I didn't have it right because my brain wasn't engaged, right? I was just picking out of the sky, angry and moving forward. Whereas if I actually had to internalize it and knew what my character was feeling, I would realize it wasn't anger, it was something way cooler.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting specific. What else did we talk about?
I think you got an off screen, info dumps and off
Off
screen.
screen. Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I've got two more if I
All
can
right,
go
let's
through
do
them
two
quickly,
more.
and I can
Yeah.
do them quickly. Um, if you are describing a crowd or many versus one, try again, it's related to the specificity rule and zoom in. So to show a crowd rather than saying a crowd, which is impossible for somebody to actually imagine, zoom in on one or two people in the crowd and show us a detail or two about them, right? So instead of saying the crowd, stormed the stage, it's a mother at the front ran after the 4-year-old and grabbed him up so he didn't get trampled, right? Like whatever, and give me a detail or two about what are they wearing? What kind of crowd is this? And then the second one related to that. Um, Oh, and many versus one also has to do with, remember I said earlier, like in memoir, for example, if you do something all the time, rather than saying, many times I went to the river and fished, right? I can't picture many times. I have nothing to actually absorb versus, one one of the days that you went to fish, like bring us to a moment. Don't just
Yeah.
summarize that. Bring us to a moment so that we can imagine it. And then the other category is to be don't show us what isn't there. I can't picture that either.
Mm.
She just disappeared. Okay. How about, there was a puff of smoke and all that was left was the white walls of the room. So much more interesting. I have something I can move on. She just disappeared. It's like it didn't even happen for your reader. You missed it. You missed the moment. The shelves there were no books on the shelf. Okay, what is there? The shelves were bare with a thick layer of dust. I can see that there's
Hmm.
no books there, right? So flip that negativity into a positive to give your reader something to focus on and not something to not focus on.
Oh, that's a really interesting one. Because I actually that's a piece of advice I get from one of my critique partners all the time is I have a tendency to like expect a character expects a reaction from someone and the character doesn't have that reaction. It's like they didn't say anything. And she's like, don't tell me what they didn't do, tell me what they did do.
Yes, thank you. Yes, exactly. And that's the one. Yeah, and these are just different ways to look at things that are probably covered by other writing advice. But if you group them all into this and do them as a pass of your writing and look specifically for these moments when you're telling, and then decide, well, that one I don't think you ever want to tell it. But decide, am I zooming in or zooming out? Is that okay? Is this a
Hmm.
moment? Because showing is always slower. It's slowing it down, and a lot of times, especially YA writers, right, Sam? We're always talking about pacing and making it faster, 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 faster.
Yeah.
But there are moments, right? There's that really gut punch moment where you can slow it down and make sure, like, don't bury he died in the middle of a long paragraph, right? Draw it out. It's important, or
Yeah.
readers will miss it.
Yeah. And actually, I was on Susie's podcast to talk about tension and like building tension. And that was one of the things we talked about was that you actually can increase tension by slowing things down. So one of the
Yeah.
choices is to you can increase the reader emotional investment and increase the tension by showing more and slowing things down. And you sort of create more distance and like less engagement and less tension when you tell more.
Yeah. And so, but use it judiciously and decide. That's your job as the director of your book, as the writer. I like to say, and another one, just because, we're both YA and we like fantasy and all the things, but um, if you're writing about magic, it's one place where don't be shy. Make it big, make it weird, right? Don't make it so subtle because you're shy that readers could think that it was just something in regular life that some woo person just interpreted as magic. Like, make
Yeah.
it obvious. Um, and I say that lovingly, by the way. I aspire to be a woo person. I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm trying to learn.
Um,
Yeah.
so I guess in closing, so you've given us a lot of really great advice about um, ways to, that ultimately you have to decide when you're showing, when you're telling, and that you have all these tools at your disposal for how you can look in your manuscript to figure out if you're showing, if you're telling, right? Obviously, you'll need other people to weigh in too, but you've given people some like very specific like things they can look for in their manuscript that will clue
Yeah.
them in. At what point in the process, in the writing process, should writers be thinking about and figuring out this stuff?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a really good question because don't let like the fear of showing on a first draft stop you from getting that first draft down. Definitely not. It will start to be more natural as you go. I would say, the one about deciding things, probably you're going to look at that as early as you can. But yeah, this is second draft, third draft stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I'm giving you specifics to look for in your manuscript, right? These are the places, if you're doing this, you're telling, go and revise it. It's a revisionary skill to go in because I mean, and I think it's Lisa Cron who said this as well. Might have been Jenny or both of them, but your first draft is just telling yourself the story for the first time.
Yes.
And so
Yeah, and
don't
telling
stress about
telling
it.
yourself the story, not
Yeah.
showing
So
yourself the
don't
story.
stress about it. If you're trying to make I mean, I'm somebody who revises as I go, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do as many passes. It doesn't always work out that way. But and I enjoy that. I enjoy revising much more than drafting. But if you are somebody who really benefits from just writing through to the end because you need to figure out all the nuances, do that and don't worry about this until your second draft. And if you're working with a coach like myself, and I'm sure Sam, you're the same, don't worry if I'm flagging it and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this because we're gonna help, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's the nice thing about having a really skilled critique partner and or coach. But yeah, if you don't have that luxury, then you got to learn how to figure this out yourself and how to find it in your drafts. And that's what the tips on this podcast will help you do.
Yeah, because like when I'm reading pages from one of my writers and I'm flagging something like that and they're drafting, I usually do just tell them. I was like, I'm highlighting this for you so you know. I don't want you to fix it in this scene right now. I want you to start developing an instinct for
Yeah,
it and start practicing it in the scenes that you draft forward
exactly.
because you'll start to be able to like naturally without thinking about it layer in more of these skills, but you have to have them like pointed out to you first. But otherwise, yes,
Yeah.
I would agree it's more of a thing to look at in revision.
Yeah. Let's turn those stick figures into the Mona Lisa, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's the idea.
I mean,
And
Mona Lisa
uh,
started as a stick figure, I'm sure. Like underneath all of that,
maybe,
there's
maybe,
there's like a circle. There's an oval for her face, right? There's probably
maybe.
some, line work underneath there that Da
I
Vinci
wasn't
did.
there, but I could tell you a story about being there. You
Oh
might
yeah.
even believe it.
Is it
I was
true or
there
did you
when the
make it
Mona
up?
Lisa was. No, I made it up. I was not there when the Mona Lisa was
Oh, I
painted.
thought
I
you
mean,
meant
I'm
like
old, but not
seeing.
that old.
I thought you meant like going to see it in the Louvre.
Oh, no, I've
You were
been
going to tell
there.
me a
Yeah,
story about that.
I have been there.
Um,
No, no stories. It's actually very underwhelming. It's the opposite of standing at the fork in the road. The decision's made. It's small. It's there, and you're there,
yeah,
and there's no decision. Yeah.
yeah. Well, if folks want to learn more about how to show versus tell, Suzy does have an excellent podcast called the Show Don't Tell podcast. Suzy, where else can people hear from you, learn from you?
Yeah, come find me on my website, suzyvadori.com. I send out a weekly newsletter with tons of fun tips. Been doing it for a lot of years, and I would love to have you over there in my community. And yeah, come find me on the podcast.
All right. Well, Suzy, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, writer. Want my support to get your book finished and out into the world? Join my Inner Circle membership, a community of supportive writers where each month we set goals, share pages, learn new techniques, and get you unstuck fast so that you can make continuous progress on your writing goals. Coached Writers Finish. And you can get me as your virtual book coach in this group program for only $199 a month, much less than a single one-on-one coaching session. Check out the details at suzyvadori.com/inner circle. We have live events happening all the time, so grab your spot now to join us.